Well, it's me, Brian. Okay, today we're gonna do a higher thinking video, right? Years ago, when I was staying back in my mom's house, right? Um, I made a video, people in their predictability, right? And so I'll leave a link in the description for that video, right? Okay, now I want to pick that one back up. So, cause I remember it was a pretty good video. People watched most of it when they did watch it, right? And it was interesting, you understand, and but I didn't really explain a whole lot of what I was talking about. So today I figured I'd, saying for you homeless people, newbies, right? You know what I'm saying? I tell you a couple of little stories, right? And show you the predictability and the unpredictability of people. You know what I'm saying? When you're out there running around in the expanse, right? You know what I'm saying? Trying to figure things out. Now, there's this one guy. You should call him Underpass Mike, right? He's when I used to ride my bike to work, right? You know what I'm saying? That Monday to Friday, every day, right around 1 o'clock, because I didn't have to be at work till 3, right? You know what I'm saying? I'd ride my bike down through the underpass at Central and Taylor, right there in the middle of downtown Phoenix, right? And where the train yard is, right? And I'd always stop there every time, you know what I'm saying? And I'd smoke me a bomber, you know what I'm saying, before I got to work, right? You know what I'm saying? Pretty simple. I mean, take a break. Because at that point, I'd ridden my bike 6 miles just to get to where I was, and I still had another 4 miles to go to get to work. Take a break, smoke a bomber. Right? You know what I'm saying? Relatively quiet, peaceful, the underpass, and saying much traffic. Right? You know what I'm saying? Well, good old underpass Mike. One day I come down through there, you know what I'm saying? There was this guy sitting there, right? Homeless guy, fumbling around with his stuff, just not whatever. You know what I'm saying? And he was sitting a couple of steps down from where I usually sit. Predictability. Right? You know what I'm saying? Because he'd probably seen me a couple of times, from the other side, or from, up, from at the top, because I was locked down at the bottom. And he knew every day that I was going to be there at this certain time. I was being predictable. Right? You know what I'm saying? So this one day, he was sitting there. You know what I'm saying? I come plop down, push my bike over to the side, pulled out my bomber, you know what I'm saying? And licked that puppy right up, like I wasn't even paying him any mind. And he looked at me kind of funny. Right? And I just puff it away, you know what I'm saying? I was waiting for him. He was sitting there, you know what I'm saying? He didn't tell me I had to go. Right? So, you know what I'm saying? After a couple, 2, 3 puffs, I handed it to him. Right? Knowing full well, you know what I'm saying? That just by the conversation that me and this dude were having, that tomorrow he was going to be there, same time. And the next day, and the next day, you know what I'm saying? Right? And it only took me like about, into the middle of the second week, like 11, 12 days in, to figure out his pattern, because he wasn't always there every day, right? But he was there, a couple, 2, 3 days the first week, and, at least 2 days the second week, you know what I'm saying? And then the third week, and just this pattern started to emerge, and I started thinking about it, you know what I'm saying? And pretty soon, you know what I'm saying, it got to the point where before I even left to take off to go to work at like 12:30, you know what I'm saying, 12 o'clock, whenever I felt like it, you know what I'm saying, I knew, depending on what day it was, I knew Underpass Mike was going to be there waiting for me so he could get high. Because that was his mindset. He wanted to get high without no strings, without having to pay, without having to share with all of his homies and his road dogs and greedy bastards. You know what I'm saying? And he wanted, he wanted to enjoy his buzz. You know what I'm saying? Once he got it, that was his mindset. And he knew, just from watching me and my being predictable, because all humans are creatures of habit. We do the same shit over and over, right? That was his opportunity, at least 1 day, 2 days, maybe 3 days a week, for him to pop up, saying out of the clear blue, hey bro, what's going on, OG? Hey man, every once in a while he'd have a bomber, or maybe he'd have a 40 or something. You know what I'm saying? Right? And we'd sit there for a half hour bullshitting, this and that, whatever. You know what I'm saying? And I'd wander up, ride off to go to work, and he'd wander off to go wherever he went to go on his next adventure. Right? You know what I'm saying? There's a pattern to it all. You know what I'm saying? If you're new, you know what I'm saying, and you're trying to figure, and you're hanging out with the people, and you're trying to figure them out, watch what they do. Figure out their pattern. Don't try to figure them out or get into their brain. You don't got to. Actions speak louder than words. All right? Now, here's another one, right? That how predictable people are. You know what I'm saying? This is just an example. I'm not judge. I don't judge people. I don't care what you do. You know what I'm saying? But Kevin, he's a little bit younger than me. He was like about 57, 58, something like that. You know what I'm saying? He was a vet, homeless vet, right? You know what I'm saying? And he was partially disabled because he got wounded over there in Afghanistan when back in the 90s when they were having the war over there in Iraq and all that shit, right? So he didn't move around very good, you know what I'm saying? And he was pretty fucked up. And he was a drug addict, right? And Kevin was addicted to meth, right? But Kevin was reliable because Kevin still had his wits about it, right? He lived in the 5 square block area between 36th Street McDowell, east to 34th Street, north to Roosevelt, and then back to 36th Street. In that half mile square grid, right, was Kevin's area. And when within that area, he had 5 or 6 different spots where he would camp. Because Kevin set up a tent, he had a basket, he did the whole bit, you know what I'm saying? Right? And the cops, about every couple of weeks, you know what I'm saying, he'd post up at a spot, and he'd set up his camp, and people come by and hang out, blah, 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 you know what I'm saying, Kevin's camp! Right? And cops would let it go for, 10 days, 2 weeks or so. And then they'd drive up and they'd tell Kevin, they'd check his ID. He was always legit. You know what I'm saying? He probably always had dope on him. You know what I'm saying? But he was always, his ID was always good. He never had any warrants. If he did accidentally get a ticket from one of the cops or something, the next day he'd push his basket up to Lisa's house and stuff it in the garage, and he'd jump on the train and he'd go downtown and straight to court and he'd pay it. So he never had any warrants. He was always legit. You know what I'm saying? And the cops knew he was very predictable because he only had these 5 or 6 places within this grid square that they could always find him. You know what I'm saying? So they'd drive up, run him through, make sure he was good, and say, okay, Kevin, you gotta go. And the neighbors are complaining, you've been here for 2 weeks, there's trash all over the place. You know what I'm saying? Right? If you get some of these idiots to pick up the trash, you know what I'm saying, we'll let you go. And a few times Kevin did. You know what I'm saying? With my help and Luis's help. You know what I'm saying? And a couple other, high-ranking members of the neighborhood, you know what I'm saying, made them, because it was their mess. You know what I'm saying? The cops would let him go. And, every couple, 2-3 weeks, right? I watched the pattern of it all, and I knew that on certain days when I would come back from work, I wouldn't find Kevin at his spot because the cops would have come by and they would have made him move. But I knew the pattern that Kevin had, and I just, on that day when I got back, back to the hood from work, I'd just ride over to, over at 34th Street lot, and there'd be Kevin set up with his tent. And when I left to go to work that morning, he never told me that nobody knew the cops were going to show up that day. But I knew from the pattern. You see how predictable it is, you know what I'm saying, if you watch people enough, you know what I'm saying, and you mind your business and you stay out of trouble, and you don't tell on nobody, you don't tell nobody their business, you will melt into the background. Yeah, you'll make friends. Yes, you'll make acquaintances. Yes, you'll have business associates, right? But slowly over time, you understand, just your silence, right, and your ability to keep your tongue in your mouth, you understand, will prove to the street people, you understand, that you have some kind of value, right? But at the same time, they're watching you. And those times when you do open your flap and you run some shit out, they're listening to it. All right? Now, let's flip the coin over and let's show you how unpredictable people can be, right, when you think you got them figured out. Kevin. Now, there was a time when, you know what I'm saying, I think back, this was 2020, like about summer of 2020, right? Kevin, through his hustles and his bustles, and because Kevin was a hustler, right? He ended up with this little 32 Colt pistol, right? And he had it for a while, and nobody knew, and I didn't even know until one day one night I came back from work. He was in his tent, he was cleaning, right? And I said, Kevin, what do you do with a pistol? I need a pistol. Them motherfucking punks are trying to steal my shit, right? And I'm like, okay, cool. Saying he's a veteran, he's been in combat, he knows how to handle firearms. I'm good with Kevin. You know what I'm saying? He knows what he's doing. Arizona, open carry. Right? You know what I'm saying? A couple of weeks goes by, and somebody found Kevin, probably because he was wired out of his mind one day, left it out, laying out, and one of the street rats seen it. Right? You understand? Well, bing, within hours, you understand? They not only stole the pistol, they took his whole basket, everything. Because he was they waited for him to go across the street to Circle K to get a cup of coffee and a bag of nuts or whatever the fuck, right? And jacked all of his shit. Boom, took off down the other end of the alley, they were gone. But I lived in that hood for 10 years. I knew who all the gang members are. Brian, being Brian, knows who the gang leader is, Luis. Right? East Side homies. Right? You know what I'm saying? When I got back from work that night, Kevin was sitting over there across the street at the Circle K, all bummed out. And he didn't have his basket, he didn't have any of his shit. He didn't even have his backpack. I'm like, Kevin, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? And he ran down what happened to me. And I said, really? I said, so did anybody do anything about it? He said, no, motherfuckers. I help them all the time, but nobody wants to help me at least get my basket, my sleeping bag back. You know what I'm saying? I said, all right, cool. I'll handle this for you. Right? You know what I'm saying? Now, I'm not that stupid to go chase after a bunch of fucking street rats that got a pistol, right? And try to beat them up and take Kevin's shit back. Right? You know what I'm saying? And this is how unpredictable I am if you think you know me or you think you've got me figured out. Right? Right? I have respect for myself. So other people that have respect for themselves, they recognize that fact. Right? And they know who you are, and they know what kind of a person you're going to be. I knew Luis. I've known Luis for 10 years. Right? I didn't go chase after his little soldiers. I went straight to the top, and I took Kevin with me. Right? When we got there, I knocked on the door. Right? The little homie opened the door. Hey, OG, what's up? Right? He knew. Right? I said, Luis here? He said, yeah. Luis said, hey, OG, what's up? Come on in, bro. Because he didn't know anything about this. Right? So I brought Kevin with me, walked in, sat down, introduced Kevin to Luis to Kevin, blah, 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 blah. He's one of my street homies. He's a vet from Iraq. And he said, check this out, Luis. Some of your boys jacked his shit because he had a pistol. I said, they didn't just take your pistol, they took all of his shit. Look at him, he's an old man, he's fucked up. He didn't even got a sleeping bag or his backpack or nothing. What the hell's up with this kind of shit, Luis? You letting him do this stuff now? And Luis sat right there and let me rant for a half hour. Right? And when I was done, he looked at me, he nodded his head, he snapped his fucking fingers, and within 10 minutes, all four of them idiots were standing right in front of us. Right? Yeah, Kevin got his shit back. And, right, Luis gave him an 8-ball for the pistol so that Kevin wouldn't be vulnerable to other idiots out on the fucking street because he's got a pistol. And, because I came to Luis and did it the right way and brought Kevin and let him tell his own side of the story, right, you know what I'm saying? Luis respected Kevin and protected him from that point forward. Anybody that fucked with Kevin was liable to feel the wrath of the East Side homies. And there were a lot of them. Right? You see how unpredictable the outcome of this little scenario is, just simply because I had enough, right, in here and up here, to know how to solve the problem. Right? There's a whole lot of thinking involved in being homeless. Yeah, I've said there's a system to homeless a million times. But I've also said this, right? You have to figure out what that system is and how it works for you, right? By paying attention, right? And keeping in mind these simple facts. Number one, right? You are a target, no matter what. Unless you belong to one of the local neighborhood associations, right? Or any of the other little affiliated associations, or somebody that's got some value or some worth that could bring something to the club. All right? Juggalos, street gangs, right? And the homeless people gangs, right? And they're all the same. They all act in a very predictable way, right? You understand, when it comes to newbies. And they can tell. They know you're a newbie. It's not just because you got a brand new backpack and a new pair of Nikes. Right? It's the way you carry yourself. It's the way that you're looking around at everything, trying to figure out who's good and who's bad. Right? It's the simple fact that when you walk into Circle K to get yourself a little bit of food to eat, right? You understand that when it's your turn to go cash out, you pull out your little bank card and you swipe, right? And it's different from all of the government little debit cards that they all have, right? They know you're a newbie because you still got a bank account. There are so many ways to tell, you understand, that you have no idea that you're radiating outward. You know what I'm saying? And that makes you a mark. Off the top, right out. It don't matter who you are. It don't matter how big you are. It doesn't matter how smart you are. You understand? It doesn't matter. They are using your own human predictability against you to figure you out so that they know what kind of a person you are, so that they know how to approach you, or they know how to use you in this situation or that situation, and you end up being the bag man and not them. Think about it, right? Don't just run out there thinking, watch a couple of videos on, had a couple of conversations on Discord, right? Those people on Discord don't know anything. Half of them are lying and the other half are faking it. Right? Because homelessness, you can defeat this. You can work your way out of it. If you approach it in the right way, and you think about it, and you see yourself the same way other people around you see you. Right? That's your own defense. Right? Please like and subscribe, share this video if you think other homeless newbies need to know before they get took. Right? You know what I'm saying? Just me, Brian. Thank you. Dude, how's that?